Welcome back to our channel, your ultimate source for the most explosive and heart-wrenching updates from Genoa City. Today is a beautiful day, but the skies over the Newman Empire are darker than ever as we prepare to uncover a devastating family tragedy. Let us dive straight into the shocking revelations that will change everything. A terrifying shadow has fallen over the glittering skyline of Genoa City, threatening to extinguish the light of its most iconic matriarch forever. Nikki Newman, a woman who has survived decades of ruthless corporate warfare, vicious enemies, and her own harrowing battles with addiction, is now facing an invisible, lethal assassin within her own mind. The devastating diagnosis of a fast-growing malignant brain tumor has left her completely isolated in a mansion that suddenly feels like a gilded tomb. She has been desperately clinging to a web of lies, terrified that revealing her terminal condition would strip away her final shreds of dignity and autonomy. But as her physical deterioration becomes impossible to conceal, the fragile walls of her deception are beginning to crumble under the immense weight of her suffering. Will the truth emerge before this lethal disease claims her life? Watching this agonizing decline from the shadows is Victor Newman, a daughter buckling under the sheer psychological terror of her mother's deadly secret. Victoria has been forced to carry the crushing burden of this lethal diagnosis, watching helplessly as Nikki's agonizing headaches and terrifying vision loss ravage her once unbreakable spirit. Every single day, Victoria is torn between honoring the desperate, tearful promise she made to her mother and the overwhelming instinct to scream the truth from the rooftops so that Nikki can get the help she needs. The emotional toll is catastrophic, exacerbating Victoria's own hidden medical crisis as her early-stage heart failure threatens to strike her down alongside her mother. How much longer can Victoria endure this suffocating silence before her own heart literally gives out from the unbearable stress? The breaking point arrives with a horrifying finality that shatters Victoria's remaining resolve and forces her hand. Witnessing Nikki collapse in a terrifying heap, completely drained of the fierce vitality that once defined her, Victoria realizes that her silence is no longer an act of loyalty, it is a definitive death sentence. The agonizing sight of her mother, writhing in pain, stubbornly refusing the massive medical intervention she desperately needs, pushes Victoria over the absolute edge of reason. She knows that by exposing the truth, she will invite Nikki's unparalleled wrath and permanently damage their profound bond, but she is willing to sacrifice their relationship if it means saving her mother's life. What unimaginable consequences will Victoria face when she finally detonates this explosive secret and betrays the woman she loves most? Fueled by a desperate, adrenaline-fueled determination, Victoria storms into the executive suite of Newman Enterprises, completely ignoring the imposing, terrifying aura of her father, Victor Newman. The patriarch is deeply engrossed in his ruthless machinations, still orchestrating his dark conspiracies and manipulating the lives of his enemies with cold, calculated precision. But Victoria's tear-stained face and trembling voice instantly shatter the icy corporate atmosphere, signaling that a catastrophe of epic proportions has breached their impenetrable fortress. She bypasses his usual intimidation tactics, locking eyes with the most powerful man in Genoa City, preparing to deliver a blow that will bring him to his knees. How will the great Victor Newman react when the armor of his empire is pierced by a tragedy he cannot control or manipulate? With her voice breaking and tears streaming down her face, Victoria drops the devastating bombshell that will forever alter the Newman family's destiny. She reveals the horrifying truth that Nikki's recent struggles are not merely a flare-up of her multiple sclerosis, but a terminal, rapidly expanding malignant brain tumor that is pressing against her optic nerve. The words hang in the air like a death knell, echoing through the cavernous office and completely paralyzing the usually unshakable patriarch who has always believed himself to be a god among men. Victoria details the agonizing symptoms, the terrifying prognosis, and the desperate, heartbreaking reality that Nikki is slipping away from them with every passing second. Can Victor's immense wealth and power possibly combat an enemy that is already destroying his wife from the inside out? But Victoria does not stop at the medical diagnosis. She unleashes a torrent of long-repressed fury, directly accusing Victor of accelerating Nikki's tragic decline. In a moment of raw, unfiltered confrontation, Victoria blames Victor's ruthless obsession with power, his toxic manipulation of Matt Clark, and his relentless, cruel ultimatums for breaking Nikki's heart and crushing her spirit. She screams that his cold-blooded vendettas and emotional neglect have created a toxic environment of immense stress, leaving Nikki too exhausted and heartbroken to fight for her own life. Victoria's bitter accusations slice through Victor's defenses, forcing him to look at the collateral damage of his dark conspiracies and the pain he has inflicted on his own wife. Will Victor finally recognize the horrifying cost of his endless wars, or will he deflect the blame to protect his fragile ego? For the first time in decades, the invincible Victor Newman completely crumbles, his legendary composure shattering into a million jagged pieces on the office floor. The initial wave of paralyzing shock rapidly morphs into a frantic, suffocating panic, and then into a desperate, helpless rage at having been kept entirely in the dark about his wife's impending demise. He is utterly devastated by the realization that the woman he loves more than life itself has been suffering in agonizing silence, terrified of his reaction and desperate to escape his overbearing control. The profound betrayal of being excluded from the most critical battle of Nikki's life tears at his soul, leaving him gasping for air as the reality of her impending death sets in. How will the patriarch channel this overwhelming despair into a coherent strategy to save the love of his life before time runs out? Driven by sheer terror and a desperate need to make amends, Victor abandons his corporate empire and rushes to Nikki's side, setting the stage for a heart-wrenching confrontation. When he bursts into her sanctuary, his eyes filled with a terrifying mixture of panic and profound sorrow, Nikki instantly realizes that her ultimate, closely guarded secret has been exposed to the one man she wanted to hide it from. The air in the room grows heavy with tension as the husband and wife stare at each other, the unspoken weight of decades of love, betrayal, and manipulation hanging between them like a suffocating fog. Nikki's carefully crafted protective walls are instantly obliterated, leaving her entirely exposed and vulnerable to the overwhelming presence of her husband. What will happen when the unstoppable force of Victor's desperation meets the immovable object of Nikki's fierce pride? Nikki's reaction is not one of relief, but of explosive, unadulterated fury directed entirely at Victoria for her monumental betrayal. Feeling completely stripped of her autonomy and her dignity, Nikki lashes out, devastated that her daughter would violate her sacred trust and subject her to Victor's suffocating pity and relentless control. For Nikki, keeping the secret was her final act of control in a life that has constantly been dictated by the powerful men around her, and Victoria's confession has robbed her of the right to face her mortality on her own terms. The profound sense of betrayal shatters the mother-daughter bond, leaving Nikki feeling more isolated, angry, and desperate than ever before as she faces the darkest chapter of her life. Can Victoria ever earn back her mother's forgiveness, or has this desperate act of love permanently destroyed their relationship? Faced with his wife's blistering anger and profound despair, Victor does the unthinkable. He drops his legendary pride and falls to his knees, begging Nikki to let him help her. With tears in his eyes, he promises to move heaven and earth, to liquidate his entire empire if necessary, just to buy her another day, another hour, another breath. He acknowledges his past failures, his suffocating control, and the immense pain he has caused her, pleading for one final chance to prove the depth of his devotion and to make things right. This rare, raw display of absolute vulnerability from the ruthless patriarch is a shocking testament to the severity of the crisis and the boundless depth of his love for her. Will Victor's desperate, tearful pleas be enough to penetrate Nikki's hardened shell and convince her to fight for her life? Realizing that Nikki's stubborn refusal to seek aggressive treatment is a fast track to the grave, a fragile, unprecedented alliance forms between Victor and Victoria. Setting aside their own massive personal and corporate differences, the father and daughter unite with a singular, desperate mission to force Nikki into accepting the medical intervention she so desperately needs to survive. They surround her with a united front of fierce, uncompromising love, refusing to take no for an answer and systematically dismantling every excuse she offers to surrender to the disease. It is a grueling, emotionally exhausting battle of wills as they fight to reignite the spark of survival in a woman who believes her story is already coming to a tragic end. Can this united family front successfully pull Nikki back from the terrifying precipice of death and give her a reason to keep fighting? Wasting no time, Victor mobilizes the infinite, staggering resources of the Newman Empire, launching a frantic global hunt for the world's top neurological specialists and experimental treatments. He transforms his immense wealth and power into a weapon against the tumor, refusing to accept the terminal prognosis and demanding miracles from the medical community at any cost. Private jets are dispatched. Renowned surgeons are flown into Genoa City in the dead of night, and every conceivable medical avenue is explored with a ruthless, terrifying efficiency that only Victor Newman possesses. Victor is determined to rewrite the laws of medicine to save his wife, operating with a manic intensity that leaves everyone around him breathless and awestruck. Will this unprecedented mobilization of wealth and power uncover a hidden cure, or is Victor fighting a battle that simply cannot be won? As the medical chaos swirls around them, this catastrophic health crisis forces Victor and Nikki to confront the deeply fractured, complex reality of their legendary relationship. The tumor acts as a brutal magnifying glass, exposing the decades of unspoken resentments, the toxic power struggles, and the profound, undeniable love that has always tethered them together through every storm. They are forced to strip away the armor of their public personas and communicate with a raw, terrifying honesty that they have aggressively avoided for years. In the shadow of impending death, the petty grievances and corporate wars fade into insignificance, leaving only the stark, agonizing truth of their unbreakable yet deeply damaged bond. Will this devastating tragedy finally heal the deep wounds of their broken marriage, or will it simply highlight the insurmountable distance between them? The clock is ticking mercilessly for Nikki Newman, and the stakes for the entire Newman family have never been higher or more terrifying. Every passing moment brings the threat of permanent blindness, agonizing pain, and the ultimate terrifying finality of death if the treatments fail to eradicate the malignant growth. As Victor and Victoria